This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 666 at portlanddistro.com for 15% off on all purchases. How's it going, friends? Another week has passed, and it's time for this week's Everything Went Black. Now, I'm sure everyone at this point is probably really sick of hearing about Joe Rogan. And I thought about forgoing any kind of commentary on it. But people have been asking me my thoughts, and it ties in so closely with some of the worldview that I have, especially regarding censorship, freedom of speech, the far left, and their bizarre war against expression, for lack of a better term. But I wanted to make a statement about that. I thought about putting it on a Patreon as a Patreon episode, but I figured this is like a very general thing, and I hope you guys don't mind that I'm going to ruminate on all this for this week's episode, because even if you're not on the Patreon, I think you might be interested in this. So, but before we get started, I just want to thank everyone who's joined and supported, man. I got to be honest, I'm humbled by the amount of people that have joined the Patreon, and I really, really appreciate it. And, it's great. Like I said, it's humbling to think that there are people out there that are willing to throw down even $1 of their own money to support this effort that I'm putting into doing this podcast. And it's cool. I get to put up a bunch of stuff that doesn't quite fit on this version of the show, but is tailored towards what the people on the Patreon want. Like, I've been getting a lot of great requests from you guys, and I've been answering them and putting stuff together. And in the future, you'll see some of these recommendations and suggestions for content appear on the Patreon. So I mean, it's not required, obviously, but if you want to be part of this, you can join for $1 or $5. And the $1 is the kind of entry level. You get access to the bonus material, which comes out weekly at this point. I'm actually doing almost 2 completely different shows for Everything Went Black. The $5 level gives you early access to the regular content, so you get all the stuff that's been posted that shows up on the weekly schedule, but you get it as soon as it's edited and posted. So there you go. You get kind of our early access VIP sort of domain treatment, And that's cool. We're going to figure out more stuff to do. We might add some tiers, of different types of memberships, and organize some live hangouts and live chats and that kind of thing. And I don't know. I'm real excited about it. It's I'm kind of one of these guys that doesn't get out that much. So now that tours are coming up, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I kind of keep to myself, and it's nice to interact with people. And as the world seems to be opening up, it's cool still to have this little group of dudes, and mostly dudes that are part of this thing, and coordinate some kind of hangout. It'd be really cool, I think. But before we really jump into everything, we got some awesome news on the Tombs front about tours and things like that. There's a run of dates with Cloak and Restless Spirit from Long Island. Very, very short. Very short on the East Coast, primarily a long weekend, but we booked this way in the beginning of the year when it was still questionable as to whether or not we were going to do this. So, we had some difficulties with it, but it's all set. Check the Tombs Facebook or my own personal Instagram or the Tombs Instagram, and you'll see the dates. And if you're in the area, definitely come out and say hello. Definitely feel free to stop by at the merch table or find me walking around the venue, and we'll hang out. Also, for the third time, we've rescheduled our show with Evoking, and I'm excited, and I am confident this show is going to happen. I mean, the last time I had COVID, so we had to cancel. But this is the third time, man. I guess third time's the charm. And that's at the Kingsland in Brooklyn. And it's us, Evoking, and Restless Spirit from Long Island. And Cloak could not make that show. They had some personal stuff they had to do, so it's going to be just those three bands. Really excited about that. We played with Sub-Zero, Sworn Enemy, and Nuclear Assault late last year. And, even though I was severely physically compromised because I had just gotten out of quarantine from getting COVID, and I was like, pretty shot physically, I still was like, I'm ready to go. Where's the next show? When do we got to be, when are we leaving? That was the way I felt. I was like ready to get back out there and start smashing shit, I can't announce this yet. These PR people and labels and whatnot, they like to be the ones to announce this stuff, but we got some really exciting tour plans for May and June. And that will take us to the western part of the country, place that I haven't been to in over 2 years at this point. And that's a real trip because, hell, I usually find myself out there at least twice a year. And I remember one time back in like maybe 2016, 2017, I was in San Francisco playing gigs 5 times that year. That's kind of funny. I remember playing a show at the DNA Lounge, and at that point I'd already been there like twice or 3 times already, and I talked to the settling up with the promoter, and he's like, all right, man, I'll see you guys in a couple months. And I'm like, yeah, man, see you in a couple months. And it was like that, that's the kind of life I'm used to leading, man, and for better or for worse. I mean, any of you guys who listened to the episode I did with Jamie Getz will get an insight into some of the emotional shortcomings that kind of mentality might bring to your life. But still, I like to maybe find a balance, you know what I mean? But adventure seems to be on the horizon, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm hoping to see some of you guys out there. Looking forward to putting those dates up and getting after it, you know what I mean? But the world continues to be a scary place. COVID, the rise of right-wing extremism, the rise of far-left extremism, and now Russian aggression and the Ukraine. And for the first time in a long time, it seems like nuclear annihilation is not completely off the table. Now, some of you younger people out there probably do not remember when this was a thing. When I was growing up back in the 80s, that was like a, this lurking paranoia that everyone had. That was like a subject of a lot of things, like in culture, about the Cold War and Russia and, the Soviet Union back then, nuclear annihilation, that was the era of threads and where the wind blows and all this stuff. And, there would be movies about that very same thing, about destruction, and post-apocalyptic movies and stories were abound. And that's the kind of world that seems like we're living in a version of that right now. And it's a little unsettling, and I just hope we make it through. It would be ironic that after 2 years of complete isolation, for the most part, to be blown up in a nuclear apocalypse as I leave town to head out on tour. That'd be a real drag for me, but and a drag for everyone else too. But hopefully it doesn't come down to that. If anyone's got any thoughts, like if you're a younger person and you didn't live through the Cold War, definitely hit me up, make some comments. We could talk about it. And maybe if enough people want to discuss nuclear annihilation, we can address that at some point, and talk about it amongst ourselves. But so anyway, Joe Rogan. And I'm going to make one statement about this. It's funny. I wrote this, the notes for this show a couple weeks ago, but this morning I was listening to Trevor Noah, and he made some points that are going to show up in this little treatment that I'm doing here. And I thought, I'm like, oh man, I can't even do the show now, because Trevor Noah, like, there people are going to think I plagiarized his ideas, but it's not true. I'm going to be using different examples. I don't even know if you guys listen to him, but he's a left leaning, social commentary guy, news commentary guy that I really like, and yeah, he's cool. I mean, I find him entertaining, and I agree with a lot of what his sentiments are. But I just wanted to put that little disclaimer out there that this was actually written a few weeks ago and predated Trevor's, his show. So anyway, I just want to start out saying that I'm a fan of Joe Rogan from way, way back in the beginning of his emergence on the podcasting front. I was an early listener, and I remember I got into listening to podcasts when I used to travel from Brooklyn to New Jersey for work every morning, and there was a show called the Midnight Podcast that I listened to. That was a horror zombie focused podcast. And it's funny, back then it was like there's hardly any shows out there, you know what I mean? You found stuff you're interested in, and I remember one of my coworkers was talking about starting a podcast for old music or whatever, and I was like, oh, what is that, and I don't know, I don't think that's gonna work, or whatever. And the guy doing the Midnight Podcast was talking about how he had come into some kind of static with other podcasters, and he's like, oh, well, there's never going to be any money in this, which I thought, that stuck in my mind, thinking, I'm like, I wonder if that's always going to be true, that there's never going to be money in podcasting. I know that I don't make it, I just recently started making some small amount of money from podcasting, and I've been doing it for a long time. But Rogan, for some reason, became this cultural phenomenon, and it was very unlikely. I thought it seemed unlikely to me that what he was doing would have the mass appeal that it actually does. And that really is the root, I think, of his being misunderstood, and this whole saga that he's going through. And I just want to talk about that a little bit, and like I said, I used to tune into his show. I think I remembered him from Opie and Anthony, and I was a fan of news radio, and obviously I saw him on the UFC, and that's kind of his that's his resume. He's a comedian, he's a bit part actor. I was never really into. I've seen episodes of Fear Factor, but I wasn't like a regular watcher of that, and primarily. I knew him as a cage, quote unquote, cage fighting commentator. Now remember, back in those days, MMA was akin to porn. You had to look for it. You had to go and rent a video cassette of fights, be it Pride or UFC fights, or you had to look for it online. Then slowly there became like a television deal. And then, of course, now the UFC and other MMA organizations are on regular channels. Like the UFC is on ESPN, Bellator is on Showtime. And, it's fastly becoming a mainstream entity, but it wasn't always that. It was looked down upon by a lot of people. New York State, it was illegal, people in New York want to say, oh yeah, some moral thing, but I know better than that. It was like a money thing. It had nothing to do with these savages are out there beating each other up. It's like some union money, payola bullshit, mob boss mentality. Cause that's how New York is that's what makes the world go around in New York, and the immortal words of the Wu-Tang Clan, cash moves everything around me, Dollar Dollar Bill Y'all. That's New York City, or New York State in this case. So that's his credential. He was a comedian. He's like a low-level kind of actor, and a cage fighting commentator. And then today, these days, he's, for some people, a source of news, which is completely out of his lane of expertise. And I remember, when the Spotify thing happened, like I personally don't, I'm an Apple guy, so I listen to most of the stuff on Apple Music or Apple Podcast, and that's my channel of choice. I don't really go into Spotify too much. I mean, of course, for this, for Everything Went Black, I do these playlists or whatever, just because of it's easy to do that. But Spotify to me, especially having something exclusive on a channel like that, it's like, okay, you're buying in to the mainstream ideology on some level. And I remember I was in Manhattan in the Times Square area for work one day, and I'm walking down Times Square, and a lot of you guys out there, if you've never been to New York City, that's like sensory overload being in that part of town. There's billboards, there's like people trying to sell you stuff on the street, there's like advertisements and things like that. And I remember seeing this gigantic billboard for the Joe Rogan Experience in Times Square for his Spotify show. And I remember looking up and being like, man, it's over for him. And there was a little bit of it being, well, that's my thing. This is like our thing. This is not for everyone else. You know what I mean? Like, I was there in the beginning when it was like Fleshlight was like his first sponsor, and he would have like Eddie Bravo on there, and it would just be him and his friends like talking about just really irreverent stuff, far out things. And, then slowly it built up, and you'd have guests like Graham Hancock would come on there, and you would have, a lot of more prominent people. Bas Rutten from, he's like a kickboxing and like MMA fighter, was on, and slowly it became more of a thing. It just blew up, and for who knows why. I mean, but my take on Rogan was that it was always this he always struck me as being very liberal, very very accepting, very open-minded. There was no exclusion. Now, some of the exclusionary things, maybe if he had been more discerning about some of the people he invited onto his show, he would find himself in a little bit better place. But, that kind of wasn't what it was all about. It was just kind of like free form, and that was great. That was fine when it was just a few thousand people listening and no one really cared. It wasn't in the national consciousness. It wasn't in the mainstream consciousness of society. It was this fringe underground thing, Along comes Spotify, and suddenly it's front and center. Now, coincidentally, this whole Spotify thing comes in the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Donald Trump era, the era of the Make America Great, MAGA, maniacs out there, storming the Capitol. His deal with Spotify came in the midst of this war for reality. And, we could talk about the social media aspects and the framing of information, the disinformation. All this stuff came to a head right around the same time. And then you get this guy who none of this stuff is not in his area of expertise. And to a fault, he wants to provide a free form for everyone to discuss their views, and have open discussion. Now, that would be great. That's a very, very great, lofty idea. Free speech is a cornerstone of democracy, and a free society, is reliant on your ability to express yourself. And I just wish the the left would remember that. The left used to be about free speech. The limiting of speech is an authoritarian move. And of course the right has always been thought of as the authoritarians, which they are. The right wing, let's face it, man. They try to, they try to overthrow the government. They try to pull a strongman tactic, and I'm not saying everyone that's a Republican feels this way, but, you can read the news and see what people think. They buy in to the whole Trumpist idea that the election was stolen, that, we want our guys, so we're going to go down there and raise hell and overturn the government, the election, and in effect staging a coup. So that's a whole other discussion, man. Where you land on that, I land on the idea that they should have executed all those guys, honestly. But that's just me. I think that that's a treasonous thing to do, and it's scary to me, at least, Yeah, man. So back to Rogan. Now, popularity, he's got millions of followers. People are looking to him as this beacon of free speech and free thought and this and that, and now free speech, like with the left clamping down on people, telling them, oh, well, you're a Nazi because like this is your viewpoint, you're an anti-vaxxer. Now, I'm not agreeing with anything Rogan says about the vaccine or COVID-19 or any of that stuff. It's like I don't have any views on it, because I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't even know who to look to for the right information. Like, I am out of my lane completely. And I acknowledge that I don't know anything about that stuff. So I'm staying aware. I'm not making a stand on anything. I think it's always good to be in good shape physically. It's always good to exercise. It's always good to eat right. I believe that all that stuff helps your immune system. How do I feel about the vaccines? It's a complicated subject. So you'll never see me talk about, oh yeah, I'm pro-vax or anti-vax. I'll explain my experiences with it, but I'm not going to go hard in one direction because it seems like every single month we learn more. And that's kind of the nature of science, is that science, especially with new phenomena like this COVID-19 pandemic, it's a moving target. There are no hard and fast rules. Like, new information comes, there's like new trends, there's new data, all that stuff changes. So from day to day, what you might perceive as being right is wrong at some point. Now, and that is very confusing to, the kind of Philistines out there on the right who just, well, you told me this, but no, the reality is like, you got to just stay aware. And the fact of the matter that anything that had having to do with the vaccine or the pandemic is politicized is a complete fucking failure. It's a public health issue. It's not about whether or not you voted for Donald Trump or whether or not you voted for Biden, or if you're a Republican or a centrist or a populist or whatever, or you believe that in QAnon or whatever. That should have nothing to do with public health. So we all failed. So anyway, I'm starting to get off topic here, but so this thing with Joe Rogan. I think that Rogan's true crime is hubris. I think that as more and more people supported him and more people were like, you're the guy, you're the man, look, you can't go wrong. Here's his millions of dollars. We're going to give you all this money. You got all this power. That he just started thinking that he can do whatever he wanted and not have any consequence to that, and his out was always like, well, what do you want from me? I'm a comedian. I'm a knucklehead. I'm a cage fighter. Why are you even listening to me? Well, be that as it may, people do listen to you, and you do have a responsibility. When 200 people are listening to you, yeah, you can use that out. But suddenly you're being quoted. People are using your show to like validate certain outlandish premises. That's the first place where I think he went wrong. Is like, all right, my game is being stepped up. I need to tighten up my ship and figure out what the fuck's going on. The second thing is he just did not have a good curation of his show. I mean, everyone knows he made mad money on this thing. This whole deal with Spotify. Why not hire some fucking people, man? Why not hire a staff of researchers that can help you vet who the quacks are? Like give you some intel on who's legit and who's not, and who's like a total charlatan. And I know that there's been a lot of people out there that are on his show that have just straight up, peddling false facts. And that's on him, man. That's completely on him, I mean, hell, he had John Joseph on there and claims, that the Cro-Mags is his band. We all know that's not true. But, he never thought to ask anyone. He never thought to, like, do a little bit of research to find out about anything. And that's where he went wrong, and it's unfortunate. And I hope that with all the millions of dollars he got, that he can hire a couple of researchers, a couple of people to help him curate, a couple of people to help him book his guests in a way where he's not giving a platform to some fucking maniac, And that's the responsibility that I think he needs to start shouldering, Now, the racism thing, back, in the beginning of time when he was just him and his few friends, he made that Planet of the Apes statement. I remember hearing that live, like not live, but, in real time back then on one of his bits. And I was like, ooh, that's, that's I would rethink that. I would rethink trying to express that thing, But I have to say that's the only place where I think you can say, okay, that's racist. You know what I mean? Because there's that whole audio tapestry of him using the N-word, but largely that stuff was out of context. Like he's not calling someone the N-word or referring to somebody as an N-word. He's using it within the context of describing some kind of, situation with a rapper or a lyric or, what someone else said. It's like making a movie about World War II and saying that you're a Nazi sympathizer. That's kind of like, how I see that. It's like watching Hogan's Heroes, and because they have Nazis in there saying that, those guys are Nazis, and they're not. Or the guy playing Colonel Klink is a Nazi because he has a Nazi uniform on. Now that's totally out of context because we're doing this in the entertainment field. This is not, in this case, once again, context is everything. Now, do I think that's a word that you shouldn't, in a broader sense should not be used? I think that you should be very careful about using that word because it leaves yourself open to that kind of criticism, and it's a sensitive issue, man. And like, I just think that he could have been a little bit more responsible with that. Now, I'm going to use my example. And once again, I'm using hyperbole to make a point. I'm a fan of Gigi Allen, okay? I've always been interested in that level of outsider, statement and that whole, fringe, voyeuristic, fascination with this super extreme people like that. Now, to the point where my good friend Ryan Patterson on this earlier episode, he actually, got kind of critical of me for doing an episode about Gigi Allen and, my championing of him, and because he uses, words that are not considered to be acceptable in his version of society. And all right, cool. I mean, we opened up a discussion about it, and we, I guess at the end of the day, agreed to disagree, and that's kind of how we left it, There was no, he didn't start a crusade to have me, ostracized from, the PC, world. He didn't make a big deal out of it. Now imagine if, Gigi Allen was suddenly had millions of followers and he was like this cultural icon, out of nowhere. He came from left field. One for years he's out there like playing in front of like 20 people, like smearing, feces all over himself and taking his clothes off and singing all these crazy songs about very brutal, subjects, shooting heroin, like, traveling across the country on a bus, going to jail, living his life that he was living. But then like after, 12, 13, 14 years of wilding out like that, suddenly he finds himself with all this like popular appeal and everyone's like, oh yeah, Gigi, man, it's he's an artist. Like I do think he's an artist, number one, but we're going to start embracing him, and then suddenly these regular people out there are wearing Gigi Allen t-shirts and he has a deal on Spotify. And I actually think you can get his material on Spotify, but anyway, like once again, no one cares, but it's not like millions of people are listening to him or, number one, he's dead, but he's not an entity, a known entity. No one's going to him for the responses to what I should do in the pandemic. But imagine if he was. Now imagine if suddenly he's got the ear of the general population. He's out there doing his thing, which is like pretty far outside, man. Now, is that your fault or is it his fault? I think it's your fault. I think it's Spotify's fault. I think it's like, all right, we got this guy. Yeah, he's got all these followers, but he walks a very, very, very thin line. You know what I mean? And then, suddenly, oh, by the way, what about all these song titles? Like some, millennial person is out there writing in their blog or they're, a journalist, a quote unquote journalist or whatever, and they have like their blue hair and their neck tattoo, but they're just the same as like a conservative person from the 80s, really. That's the thing. Everyone wants to have the trappings of being this like far out, I'm like this far out renegade with my neck tattoo and like my blue hair and, all this stuff. But the reality is I'm afraid of everything because it makes me uncomfortable, and that's like some like 1980s conservative bullshit, if you ask me. So this hypothetical person's out there. Oh, Gigi Allen. He's like the big Spotify sensation. They gave him millions of dollars. Let me check him out. And they find all of his songs like Cunt Sunken Cannibal, all right? Cock on the Loose. I'm going to rape you. These are actual song titles that Gigi has. Oh, this is no good. This is not acceptable. We can't, I can't, this guy has to be taken down. Too many people are listening to him. These ideas are too brutal and too antisocial for people. This has to be stopped. Now that sounds a lot like what the government was trying to do, that the left was railing against with people like Lenny Bruce, who his whole life was ruined because of censorship. I know that sounds like a far-fetched analogy, but it really isn't that far-fetched if you really think about it. Yeah, it's funny, it's hyperbolic, it's extreme. But Rogan, he was a guy doing what he did. And like I said, I don't agree with everything he says. I definitely don't agree with the borderline like right-wing stuff that he it talks about, I don't agree with having that dude from Vice, McGinnis, whatever the fuck his name was, the Proud Boys dude. Should have wrote his name down before I said that. That's like if I had a show, I wouldn't have him on as a guest. If I was like of that stature, I would rethink the idea of having this guy on as a guest. Guy whose whole thing about Western chauvinism and You know, like to me, it smacks of white supremacy, which is, bullshit. That's not something I support. So yeah, it's edgy or whatever. I don't know what his point was, but I just think that it was a little misguided to think that something like that wouldn't have, some kind of backlash, But then again, it's his show. He's a far out kind of guy, and it always goes back to this thing that I have about like everybody wants to be an outsider, but like nobody really wants to be outside. You know what I mean? And that kind of goes to even like the Phil Anselmo criticisms and all this other stuff. It's like, or Gigi or any of these people where it's like, oh yeah, you want to vicariously live through these people, but when it gets too intense and too real, you're going to like abandon them rather. And you're going to call for them to be condemned and ostracized and, canceled and erased and all these things. You can't have it both ways, man. It's like you're either you're in or you're out. You believe that people can say what they want. You believe that people can express themselves however they want, or you don't. And if you don't, I would seriously consider looking into the history of free speech and how it is a fairly novel thing, that it's not even something that every country in the world has, and the privilege of free speech, the right that we have in this country to express ourselves is a right that people have died for, and that some places out there, like Russia, don't have free speech, and the fact that we're splitting hairs over these things is a distraction, and the real movers and shakers in this world are distracting us from, something bigger that might be going on. And I just think that there's a better discussion to have, like people, you should, hell, the ACLU like defended Nazis to have a march, That's a strong move, man. That means you believe in what you fucking preach to people. If even something as reprehensible and evil as neo-Nazis, you're going to fight for them to be able to have their gathering of like 50 like dudes with like, Thor's hammer necklaces and, the black sun, like, symbols and stuff like that. That's some gangster shit, man. That means you're down. Anyway, language is freedom, man. And conversation is important. And even if you don't agree, and that's pretty much all I got to say about it. Once again, I'm sorry if I bored some of you guys. I really just wanted to get all this out, and I know it's a little bit late in the game, and I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing about it. And I don't want to keep this thing going. I want everyone to forget and move on and, maybe learn from this whole experience. And, as far as these fools out there who are like, oh, I'm taking my music, good for you. Like that's your freedom, but I don't even fuck, man. Spotify is like my stuff's on there for free basically because I think I've gotten paid like $2 from them. That it's people should be like picketing Spotify for being fucking crooks more than anything, man. It's like that's really what people should be open arms about, not their, oh, we have to limit content. It's like, no, you need to tell these motherfuckers that they got to like stop exploiting bands. That's really what, you need to start doing, figure out some algorithm that works for everybody, so see, there you go, man. It's just distraction, Anyway, I hope everyone's doing good. I hope we all stay alive another week. I'm looking forward to the future. Hopefully things are interesting and not dangerous. And like I said, man, keep your eyes out if you're a fan of Tombs. We've got even more tour dates being announced and more releases and things like that. So stay tuned. And I hope to see some of you guys out there on the road. And I'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Everybody knows that I'm a scumbag. They won't come and see me in this time. Everyone's afraid of what might happen to them, or if they'll even get out of there alive. Some fuckhead in the corner is getting to me, talking about the way I look and smell. I guess he doesn't know that I'm the outlaw scumfuck. Someone ought to warn him, for I'm knocking straight to hell, because everybody knows that I'm a scumbag. I like sluts and whores and I don't care. You can say just what you wanna say about me, but if I hear you, I might just go knock you off your chair, 'cause I like to drink whiskey by the gallon. I live on peanut butter sandwiches, I don't care. I spent some nights in jail in this old country. Everybody hates me, and I just don't fucking care, because everybody knows that I'm a scumbag. They won't come and see me in my life. Everyone's afraid of what might happen to them, or if they'll even